Far away in the galaxy, in a system untouched by war, the Drivel people lived in peace. They were an advanced alien race who believed in science, order, and control. For hundreds of years, they watched other species rise and fall. They had seen human transmissions, studied their languages, and even intercepted their early ships. To them, humans were wild but weak, curious but chaotic, not a threat, not truly dangerous, just another species learning to walk among the stars. One quiet day, the Drivel deep space sensors picked up something. A large ship was entering the edge of their neutral zone. It was moving slow, not broadcasting anything, not asking for permission. That alone made it suspicious. Drivel ships always announced themselves, even traders and explorers, but this ship, this silent shape, just drifted forward. At first, the Drivel believed it might be a lost human cargo vessel. Maybe it had engine failure. Maybe its crew was dead. But as the ship got closer, something didn't feel right. The scanners picked up a strange shape, too sleek, too armored, too quiet. The outer design looked simple, but something about it made even the machines hesitate. It looked like it had been built to survive more than travel, like it was designed to go into war and return. A small Drivel science ship was sent to observe. They stayed far away, hiding in a shadow field to avoid detection. Their scans were light at first, just trying to measure the size and basic structure. What they found made their captain sit up in his chair. The ship was massive, longer than any known Drivel cruiser. Its outer shell was made of layered alloys, some human, some unknown. But it wasn't just the size or material. It was the way the layers moved, like they could shift or adjust depending on threat level. Then they scanned deeper, and everything changed. The energy readings coming from the ship didn't match anything on record. It wasn't just fusion or nuclear. It was something else, something hotter, deeper, ancient. It felt alive. The power coming from the center of the ship was enough to light up a moon. One scientist whispered that it felt like a caged star. Others just stared at the readings in silence, their skin growing cold. There were no broadcasts, no greetings, no signal asking for help, which was strange because the Drivel now knew this was no damaged ship. Its systems were online, its weapons charged but sleeping. It was choosing to stay silent, and that silence was the most terrifying part. The Drivel High Command was alerted immediately. Military generals, science leaders, even philosophers were called into emergency session. They looked at the images from the scans. The ship was named UHS Vindicator, an Earth warship according to its ID plate. But Earth hadn't reported anything about it leaving orbit. No distress, no military operation, not even a diplomatic mission. Just silence. The word Vindicator sent a chill through the room. To vindicate meant to avenge, to justify, to correct a wrong. Was this ship sent to deliver justice? Was it looking for revenge? Or was it a test sent to measure alien reactions? They replayed the scan footage again and again. Strange shapes on the hull, almost like scars. Some looked like burn marks. Others looked like weapon impact points. But the ship showed no damage, only proof that it had survived something brutal. If this was a normal human warship, then Earth had become more dangerous than anyone expected. Still, the Drivel weren't a panicked people. They believed in data, in logic, in preparation, and so they decided to scan again. But this time, they went deeper, ignoring the risks. They sent a focused pulse through the ship's body. What came back shocked everyone. There were layers inside that were shielded, hidden behind encryption walls, artificial intelligence systems that watched the sensors scanning it, and strangest of all, biomass signatures inside the ship. Not just human, but something else. Something mixed. It was as if the ship wasn't just made of metal and wires. It was part organic, part alive. One Drivel commander leaned back in his seat and asked quietly, "What if this isn't a ship at all? What if it's a living weapon?" No one laughed, because the idea no longer seemed impossible. The ship was still approaching, slow, steady, silent. It wasn't threatening anyone. But it wasn't avoiding anyone either. And that scared the Drivel more than any fleet of warships ever had. It was bold. It was confident. It was quiet because it didn't need to shout. It didn't need to prove anything. Across the Drivel homeworld, people started whispering. Some said Earth had awakened something ancient. Others believed humans had found alien tech and reverse engineered it. But all agreed on one thing. This wasn't just a ship. It was a message, a floating, unstoppable message from a species once considered weak. Now they wondered, what if they had been wrong all along? What if humanity wasn't just surviving? What if it was evolving? The Drivel watched the Vindicator approach. No one dared to stop it. No one wanted to wake the beast too soon. And somewhere deep in space, aboard that sleeping Titan, the humans remained unaware of the fear they had just planted. In the cold darkness of space, the Drivel command center stayed lit through the cycle. No one slept, no one laughed, no one dared to relax. The Vindicator was still moving slowly, silently, like a storm cloud with no wind. But the scans from the last pass had shaken the Drivel more than they were willing to admit. What they had seen inside the ship did not make sense. And things that don't make sense are the ones that scare the most. They gathered again in the high chamber of the science hall. Screens floated mid-air, each showing a different layer of the Vindicator. The outer hull was complex, but they had seen armor before. What frightened them was the inner structure, alive, encrypted, and watching them back. Yes, the Drivel scanners could feel it now. The human ship was aware of being scanned. It didn't stop them, didn't attack, just silently let them see what it wanted. And what it revealed next made the Drivel scientists step back from their consoles. At the center of the ship was something glowing. It wasn't a weapon they recognized, and it wasn't a normal power core. It pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. One pulse every 4 seconds, steady and calm. But the energy it gave off was enormous, more than a starship should ever hold, more than a city, more than a planet's defense grid. The Drivel had rules, limits to how much energy could be stored in one vessel. The humans clearly didn't care about those rules. The humans had built something that didn't follow anyone's law but their own. The young technician, barely 2 cycles into his role, made the mistake of saying aloud what others feared to think. If that core explodes, it could take out half the system. No one answered, but everyone heard. The room fell into a deeper silence, the kind that feels like drowning in still air. They tried again, this time with deeper scans. The results were worse, not better. There were defense systems hidden inside defense systems. Missile racks masked as cooling units. Turret slots blended into the hull like artwork. It was beautiful in the way that a lion is beautiful when its teeth are stained with blood. There were also signals they couldn't trace, old alien languages. Frequencies thought extinct. One language matched a species that had vanished centuries ago. What was a human ship doing with the voice of a dead race echoing through its circuits? The Drivel Military Council began sharpening their tone. They said humans had no right to build such a ship and fly it so close to Drivel space without warning. Some wanted to send their own warships to form a wall of power and push back. Others whispered that this was not the time to show strength, not against something that carried unknown power, unknown codes, and unknown purpose. Across the city domes of Drivel, the news leaked. People saw the scans, the images of the Vindicator's glowing core. Fear turned into wild theories. Religious sects claimed the ship was a divine punishment, a ghost vessel. Children asked if they should run underground. And the Drivel net buzzed with one question: why is it here? No one had an answer, not even the oldest minds in the Science Academy. They found one more scan that chilled them all. A sealed chamber, located near the core. It gave off no signal, no heat, no sound. It was cold and dark and surrounded by layers of security fields. Nothing could get in. Nothing could scan inside. Not even the Drivel's best probe crystals could read it. One general leaned forward and stared at the screen. "It's hiding something," he said quietly. And that was the truth that none of them could deny. The ship wasn't just powerful, it was secretive. It had built-in silence, like it was trained to carry things no one should ever see. Outside, in the vastness of space, the UH Vindicator kept moving. No rush, no panic. It didn't need to speak, because everything about it already screamed, not with noise, but with presence. The Drival didn't know if this was a message, a warning, or an invitation. But one thing had become clear. The age of viewing humans as clumsy, foolish newcomers was over. They weren't just here. They were watching, waiting, and fully aware of what they had built. And deep in their own minds, the Drival finally understood something terrifying. The Vindicator wasn't meant to destroy them. It was meant to show them. What humanity had become was not an accident. It was a decision. And now it was too late to pretend Earth was still small. The galaxy had seen the shadow of something bigger than war, and it wore a human name asterisk. The humans on board the UHS Vindicator felt no tension in the air. They were not aware that an entire alien world was watching their every move with shaking hands. To them, this mission was simple: deliver medical aid, complete the navigation run, and return to the Earth core fleet within 2 cycles. They were not a war patrol, not a battle group, but the ship they lived inside told a different story. Commander Elias Ward stood on the main deck with his arms crossed. He was a quiet man with silver strands in his dark beard and calm eyes that had seen too many suns rise over burning planets. To him, this was just another flight. His crew trusted him completely, not because he made speeches, but because he never lied. The Vindicator had earned its scars the hard way, and Elias had been there for every one of them. Behind him, Chief Engineer Hallie watched energy levels like a hawk. She knew the Drival scanners were brushing against their hull like curious fingers. She didn't raise shields or activate weapons. Instead, she smiled to herself and said, "They're trying to peek again." She ran a soft pulse through the ship's skin, just enough to say, "We see you too." In the stasis bay, below the main reactor core, a Drival rebel leader floated inside a cryopod. He was unconscious, his body wrapped in biopreservation foam. This was the true reason for their journey. The Vindicator had saved him during a secret human Drival joint operation months ago. The rebels called him a traitor. The Drival government called him dead, but Elias didn't care for politics. They had saved a life, and they would return it. No matter how complicated it was, the sealed chamber near the ship's heart wasn't a weapon vault or a prison cell. It was a sanctuary designed by Hallie herself, shielded from scans not to hide power, but to protect the being inside from harm. Everything on the ship that looked terrifying to outsiders was simply built to keep one thing safe: the people inside. But no one outside the Vindicator could possibly know that. Back on the bridge, Lieutenant Mora adjusted course, her fingers tapping quietly. "We're still 2 clicks inside neutral territory," she said. "Still no contact from Drival." "Command." Elias didn't flinch. "They'll watch, but they won't speak," he said. "They're still deciding if we're monsters or messengers." The crew laughed quietly, not with mockery, but with understanding. They had grown used to this feeling. Everywhere they went, they were either feared or worshipped, rarely welcomed, rarely understood. Because the Vindicator was not a normal ship, it was a symbol. Its bones were made from wreckage collected after Earth's last great space war. Its circuits carried knowledge from 17 different species. Its systems could run with or without a human hand, but it never did. Because Elias had made a rule: no automation without human presence. Machines could be fast, but only people could be kind. Many in the crew had personal scars from older wars. Some had lost family to alien conflicts. Some had once hated the Drival, and yet, here they were, flying into Drival space to return one of their own. That was what made them different. That was what made humanity terrifying, not because they could destroy, but because they could protect. What wasn't even theirs? The food hall buzzed softly with idle chatter. Technicians, medics, drone operators, they all lived inside the belly of this beast. But to them, it was home. They knew its sounds, its heartbeat. the gentle hum of its soul, and outside, all anyone else could see was armor. No one saw the laughter, the meals, the hand-carved chessboards left on tables. No one saw the child's drawing on the engineering wall of the Vindicator smiling like a cartoon whale. This was what the aliens never understood. The Vindicator wasn't just a warship, it was a floating village. A moving memory of what it meant to survive and still choose to care. Elias stood in his quarters, staring at a small glass case. Inside was a folded letter. Old and faded, it was from his brother killed in the Battle of Irex 9. He had promised to build a ship that would never run from a fight, but would also never start one. Elias had kept that promise. Now the Drival were watching them with fear, and Elias knew, sooner or later, they'd either open guns or open fire. He hoped for the first, prepared for the second, and somewhere, deep within the Vindicator, the engines pulsed like a slow breath. Not angry, not loud, just ready. The Drival capital was drowning in quiet panic. News of the human warship had reached every layer of command, and yet, no one dared speak the truth out loud. They were afraid, not of invasion, not of sudden attack, but of something far worse: being unprepared, being outmatched, being irrelevant. In the crystal towers of the High Council, officials gathered for what they called an urgent coordination dialogue. But everyone knew what it really was: a crisis meeting. They stood around the glowing center table, each face washed in soft blue light from the ship's scan feed. Floating above the table was a detailed 3D model of the Vindicator. It spun slowly, showing its weapons, its size, its layers. Even in model form, it felt like it was watching them back. General Veek, the head of planetary defense, slammed his fist on the table. "We should have acted the moment it crossed the neutral line," he barked. "And done what?" asked First Minister Lilai calmly. "Shoot a ship that hasn't fired a single round? Kill without knowing its mission?" Her voice was soft but sharp. "We Drival do not make war from shadows." The science minister stood next, sweat forming along his neck ridges. "Our scans reach the inner shell," he said slowly. "But something is blocking us from reading the center compartment." "Cloaking?" someone asked. "No," he replied, shaking his head. "It's not cloaked. It's sealed by design, by choice. That made the room quiet again." "What kind of species builds a ship and then refuses to share its purpose?" The question hung in the air like smoke. The answer was simple. "Humans," someone whispered. New data appeared in front of them. Thermal readings, pulse frequencies, even visual imaging through non-invasive mapping. The sealed chamber inside. The Vindicator was colder than deep space. No heat, no light, no movement. Yet the shielding around it was more advanced than any known vault. They had seen similar structures once before: protective coffins, used to carry sacred Drival relics. But this wasn't a relic, this was something else. Something the humans cared enough to protect with their most dangerous ship. The lead cultural analyst stepped forward with trembling hands. He didn't belong in military rooms, but today, no. One questioned his presence. "I believe the humans are carrying something alive," he said. "Or someone." He tapped the control pad and showed an earlier scan, the signature of a Drival lifeform deep within the chamber. It matched a rebel leader, presumed dead after a civil clash over a year ago. "Impossible," muttered one of the counselors, but the data was clear. The Vindicator wasn't threatening the Drival. It was carrying one of them home. The room spun with emotion shock, confusion, anger, and then shame, they had assumed. The worst because of the way the ship looked, because of its weapons, its silence, its size. But not once had the humans fired, spoken, or demanded. They had simply come. "They saved a Drival rebel?" General Veek growled. "Why?" No one could answer, because they all knew what the truth was. Humans didn't always act like other species. They didn't follow rules, they followed stories, and sometimes they wrote their own, outside the council dome. Crowds were gathering in city plazas. Holograms of the Vindicator floated in the air, rotating slowly. Children stared in wonder, some adults in fear, others in quiet awe. Rumors spread like fire. Some said the ship could bend time, others that it had no crew at all. But the true story, the simple truth that it had saved a Drival, was harder to believe than all the myths. A group of protesters held signs that read, "Do not shoot the unknown." Another group chanted, "It hides what it intends." Both sides had fear. Both sides were guessing, because no one really knew the humans. The Vindicator hovered just outside defense perimeter orbit, its engines dimmed to low power. Its lights flickered gently like stars caught in fog. It didn't move, didn't talk, didn't try to explain itself. And that terrified the Drival the most, because something so powerful should want to boast. But this ship didn't. It had nothing to prove. Inside the High Council chamber, the debate continued. Some wanted to send a message, others wanted to prepare missiles. Only a few wanted to open their hearts. But everyone agreed on one thing. No one had seen this coming. Not from Earth, not from the humans, not from the ones they once called wild children of the stars. Now those same children were knocking on their gates, and the Drival didn't know if they should open them or run. The stars above Drival. Space shimmered quietly, but deep beneath that stillness, tension crackled like a live wire. The UHS Vindicator held position near the neutral line, unmoving, watching, or maybe just waiting. Its engines had cooled to a soft blue glow. Its weapons remained asleep, yet the silence felt louder than war drums. No other human ship was in sight, no escort, no warning fleet. Just this one beast, a single ship, built like a mountain in motion, floating gently in the dark. Inside the Vindicator, no one was nervous. Commander Elias Ward leaned against the central console, reading through updated navigational logs. To him, the mission had not changed. He had been given orders: return the Drival individual in stasis. Simple, clear, human. But the silence from the Drival side made him pause. Lieutenant Mara glanced over from the op station. "They know we're here. They're not blind," she said. Still no reply to our transmission. "Maybe they're afraid of what we've brought." Elias replied calmly. Mara tilted her head. A Drival citizen in need of care, or the ship? He didn't answer, and he didn't need to. Everyone on the Vindicator knew the truth. People saw the ship before they ever saw the crew, and what they saw scared them. Chief Engineer Halley walked into the bridge, holding a datapad. "We've just been scanned again. 6 times, same pattern," she said. Elias raised an eyebrow. "They're not looking for threats." "No," Halley agreed. "They're trying to figure out the sealed chamber." "Let them wonder," Elias said, quietly. The stasis pod deep inside that chamber held the rebel Drival Archon. Once a voice of peace during the resource uprisings, he had been caught between 2 Drival factions and left for dead. But humans didn't let people die when they could help. The Vindicator had pulled him from the wreckage, stabilized his organs, and placed him into preservation. No one told Earth Command. No one asked permission. Elias simply gave an order, and the ship obeyed. Now they were delivering him back. Not as a message, not as a trophy, but because it was the right thing to do. That's what humans did when no one else would. They stepped into the fire for strangers, but outside, the Drival didn't know that. They didn't know the crew shared meals, told stories, and listened to music made from Earth's oceans and wind. All they saw was the armor. All they felt was the energy pulsing like a hidden sun behind dark metal. And so they feared what they could not read. They feared the stillness. Elias stepped away from the console and looked out the massive front viewport. Ahead, the Drival satellites floated like pearls on strings. A few fighter crafts hovered in the distance, too small to challenge, too close to ignore. They were watching, guessing, measuring. "Send the package," Elias said. Mora blinked. "Now?" Still no response. He nodded once. "It's not a negotiation, it's a return." Halley gave a slow smile. About time. In the launch bay, the cryopod was gently moved into a sleek, unarmed drone shuttle. No weapons, no tricks, just A transport capsule with one life form inside. The pod was sealed with both human and Drival clearance keys. They wanted the message to be clear: he's yours, and we kept him safe. The shuttle launched quietly, slicing through the void with a gentle hum. Elias watched it leave without blinking. He didn't care if they said thank you, he just hoped they wouldn't shoot it down. Minutes passed, long, breathless minutes. Then the shuttle was taken in by a Drival medical ship. No explosions, no interception, just a soft lock-on being guiding it to safety. Inside the Vindicator, no one cheered. They just exhaled together like one giant, tired machine. Even a small success could feel like a battle won, not because it was loud, but because it was right. Back on Drival, their council received the cryopod in stunned silence. The rebel they once called dangerous was now returned in perfect condition. There was no note, no warning, no voice message from the humans. Only a small digital log inside the pod, stabilized 23 rotations ago, monitored continuously. Zero harm inflicted. We protect life. The message didn't need a name. They all knew which ship it came from. One elder of the council covered her face with her long fingers. They didn't ask for anything, she whispered. They didn't demand apologies. They just gave him back. And that frightened them more than if the Vindicator had fired a warning shot. Because mercy from a power that big felt heavier than any threat. Out in orbit, the Vindicator stayed still. Its mission complete, but its presence louder than ever. The galaxy had always feared human violence, but now they began to fear something else entirely: human choice. The pod had landed. The rebel was alive and still. The Vindicator didn't leave. It remained in orbit like a dark moon, silent, unmoving, yet impossible to ignore. No demands were made, no messages followed, no threats appeared on anyone's screens, but across the Drival homeworld, something began to shift. Not in the skies, those remained calm, but in the hearts of the people watching from below. They had seen a monster arrive and offer peace, and now they didn't know what to believe. In underground cafes, in quiet learning halls, and in private chambers of old politicians, the same question returned again and again. What kind of species builds something that terrifying and chooses not to use it? Some whispered that it was a show of power. Others argued that it was a mistake to fear the humans so deeply. But no one could forget the image of that warship gently releasing the cryopod, like a parent placing a child in bed. A young Drival technician, barely into her first year of service, leaked the scan logs to the planetary net. It wasn't an act of rebellion, it was an act of honesty. She wanted people to see what she had seen. The pod's vitals, the healing patterns, the logs of constant monitoring. Human systems had kept the rebel alive longer than Drival tech could have. It was impossible to deny. The humans didn't just rescue him, they preserved him as if he mattered to them. The leak spread like fire across the networks. At first, people doubted. Then the confirmation came from official sources, and the world began to rethink everything they thought they knew. For cycles, the Drival had seen humans as unpredictable, maybe dangerous, always emotional, but now a different truth stared them in the face. Maybe humans weren't dangerous because they were angry. Maybe they were dangerous because they chose when not to be. The Science Council released an internal summary. The human vessel UHS Vindicator demonstrates technological superiority in structural shielding, weapon concealment, energy output, and encrypted AI systems. However, it refrained from deploying any force, even when provoked by active scans. Behavioral analysis, unpredictable, but aligned with protection and moral code. One line in that report was underlined by nearly every official who read it. They didn't have to be merciful. They decided to be. Some Drival religious leaders began speaking about the Vindicator in quiet reverence. Not worship, but wonder. If a species could carry such violence and offer peace instead, perhaps there was something sacred in their restraint. Old stories from their ancient past were brought back, legends of silent protectors, of warriors who guarded without asking for reward. Now they saw a version of those stories in the sky. Real and made of steel. Still, not everyone felt peace. A few military commanders were unsettled by this shift in tone. One said, "It's a trick." "Mercy is just another form of control." Another whispered, "What if this is only the beginning? What else have they built that we haven't seen?" But even those voices sounded unsure now, because everything the humans had done went against fear, not toward it. And what made it worse, what made it echo in every council chamber, was the fact that the Vindicator had done nothing since the pod transfer. No departure, no speech, no celebration. It didn't seek credit. It just waited, as if giving back a life had not been a mission, but a routine. As if this level of power paired with kindness wasn't a strategy, but simply who they were. Back aboard the Vindicator, Elias sat in the briefing room with the rest of his senior crew. No one said much. They knew the Drival were talking, calculating, doubting themselves. And that was fine. Elias wasn't here to prove anything. He just wanted to finish the job. "I think we changed something down there," Hallie said, looking at the monitor displaying planetary activity. "Maybe," Elias said. Tapping a small silver coin on the table, Mora leaned back and sighed. "We came with open hands." They were just too used to fists. People always expect monsters when they see sharp teeth. Elias muttered, "Let him wonder." The ship's eye pinged softly in the background, notifying minor environmental shifts, but everything else remained quiet. Outside, the stars blinked like watching eyes, and below, the Drival continued to talk about the ship that didn't speak, about the humans who didn't ask for anything, and about the terrifying truth that maybe, just maybe, the most powerful force in the galaxy wasn't war, it was choice. Asterisk. The skies over Drival space held their breath. The Vindicator had not moved for hours, days even. Its engines flickered low, like embers that could become wildfire in seconds. But didn't. No threats, no signals, no change, just presence. And that presence had begun to weigh heavily on every sensor array. It was like staring into the eye of a storm that refused to spin. The Drival defense fleet stayed frozen in position. Fighters held on standby. Commanders chewing their own doubt in silence. Because now the enemy was doing nothing, and nothing is harder to fight than calm. Then, without warning, the silence broke. But not from the Vindicator, from the Drival High Command. A transmission formal, carefully worded, but trembling between the lines. "UHS Vindicator. Your delivery has been received." There was a pause, a hesitation that felt like the pause before an apology. "We request clarification on your current intention." Aboard the Vindicator, Commander Elias Ward didn't smile. He didn't stand, didn't cheer. He just tilted his head slightly and said, "Now they ask." Lieutenant Mora looked up from her console. "Want me to answer?" "No," Elias said, rising slowly. "They're not ready for words." He walked to the communication panel and tapped in a silent reply. No text. No voice, just a single data pulse, one burst, perfectly encoded. Inside was a set of navigation coordinates, one jump away, out of their space. A message that didn't say goodbye, but clearly meant we're done here. The Drival Command Center received the pulse, decoded it, and blinked. That was it. No explanation, no demands. The terrifying human ship had returned their lost one, remained silent, and now was leaving, just like that. They didn't believe it at first, but the Vindicator's engine slowly spun up again. Glowing hotter, humming deeper, the warship was preparing for departure. In the civilian sectors of Drival's upper cities, people stared at the sky, not through windows, but through public screens. They watched as the dark shape began to drift, a slow arc, a graceful turn, a creature made of iron and fire. Leaving without spilling a drop, old generals watched in silence, their fingers twitching near alert keys they never used. Priests whispered thanks into ancient languages forgotten by most. And in one quiet square, a group of students stood in awe, not because they had seen destruction, but because they had seen restraint. A Drivel child asked her father, "Were they gods?" The father shook his head. "No," he said. "They were worse. They were human," in a dim meeting hall. Minister Lele stood alone after the council left. She watched the Vindicator's last recorded scans, slowly rotating the ships. Model with her own hand, all that power, all that strength. And yet they had come, saved a life, and left without asking for anything in return. Her voice was soft and uncertain. "What kind of enemy gives you your people back?" And no one was there to answer her in the space above. The Vindicator finished its rotation. Elias stood at the bridge, hands behind his back, eyes forward. "Time to go," he said simply. No one questioned it. No medals, no reports. No recordings for history, just another mission. The ship engaged its jump drive. Space bent, reality cracked, and in a flash it was gone, leaving behind no flames, no rubble, only questions. Questions the Drivel would ask for generations, and in the silence that followed, something strange happened. Drivel patrol ships began deactivating their weapons. Military alerts slowly faded from the skies. And a single monument was proposed on the neutral zone edge, not to glorify war, but to mark the day the galaxy saw power and was shown mercy instead. The Drivel had not been attacked. They had been humbled, not by fire, but by the choice of those who carried it. Long after the Vindicator vanished into the folds of deep space, the echoes of its visit remained, not as destruction, not as battle cries or burning debris, but as silence, an unforgettable world-shifting silence that kept speaking long after. The ship had gone. It didn't leave behind enemies. It left behind questions. The Drivel people tried to return to normal. Markets reopened. Airpaths resumed. Defense fleets returned to standard orbit. But nothing truly felt the same. Not because the humans had done something wrong, but because they had done something no one expected. Children in learning halls now drew the Vindicator in their sketch cubes, not with fire raining from its cannons, but with soft glow trailing. Behind its form, like a shadow of peace, artists made holograms of it drift in quietly. Framed in the stars, the name itself became Myth Vindicator. The ship that came without reason and left without reward. Even Drivel elders, who once refused to speak of Earth without mockery, now paused before using the word primitive. In a hidden sector of the Drivel archives, two scholars debated what the ship had truly been. One called it a ghost built from the remains of every war Earth had survived. The other called it a mirror reflecting only what others feared inside themselves. Both agreed it had changed everything. Meanwhile, the rebel Arcan slowly recovered under careful Drivel care. He refused interviews, turned away news requests. He simply asked for silence, but one phrase was overheard from his chamber, whispered again and again like a prayer. "They didn't have to save me." But they did. Across the galaxy, other species began asking new questions too. How strong had humans truly become? How many ships like the Vindicator existed? And worse, what else had humanity decided to keep secret? No one knew, and the humans never told, because silence had become part of their strategy. Years passed, but the story didn't fade. It grew, passed from one species to another. Rewritten, misunderstood, admired, feared, retold. The story of a ship that could have burned a planet but chose to protect one life instead. A ship so powerful, it didn't need to speak to be heard. And a crew so human that they made mercy look terrifying. The Drivel eventually built a monument. Not tall, not grand, just a curved piece of metal shaped like a ship's hull, with one sentence etched deep across it. Strength is not what you carry, it's what you choose not to use. And far away, in another corner of space, the Vindicator drifted once again. Its hull still scarred, its crew still quiet. Elias Ward stood on the bridge, reading a report from a distant colony. Nothing urgent, just another outpost needing help. He gave the order to set a course. The crew obeyed, without fanfare. Without question. They were not heroes. They were not conquerors. They were something much harder to define, human, and somewhere, out in the dark, Another alien sensor caught sight of them, scanned them, paused, and turned away, because now the galaxy knew when the Vindicator arrived. You didn't ask what does it want, you asked yourself, what will it choose?